Okay.
I'd suggest, okay, I was thinking that maybe you want to record when we actually start, because we, and you know, because
Me. Let's see here.
Okay, you can hear me? Thank you, Naomi. I was going to say that I suffer to speak in English. I really suffer because my English is limited and my accent is so Mexican. Well, I would like to thank the Schusterman Center for Jewish Studies and her director, Tatiana Lichtenstein, also the chief of the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, Jorge Perez, the University of Texas in Austin, so close to the story of Mexico. A lot of writers, scientists, historians are related to that important institution, also to the great library. Special thanks, Naomi, to you, Naomi Lindstrom, the organizer and architect of this event, director of Gale Collaborative on Jewish Life in the Americas, also part of the Schusterman Center for Jewish Studies. She also has written about my work. I consider her writing brilliant about my work. Thank you very much. And last but not least, thank you to Galit Pedasur that helped me with all my hesitation and spoke to me in the phone in Hebrew, which I speak a little bit better than English. Thank you for being here today and an important day after the elections. And to my friend and my colleague, Jacobo Sefami, who is helping me today with part of the reading. Gracias, Roji. Puedes empezar.
It's a privilege to accompany my dear friend Myriam. Do all the grandparents on earth speak with such strange twists and turns? Esther Benaroya grew up enveloped in that Spanish, intermingled with words from other worlds. Judeo-Spanish was not the language of her studies, but it was the language she heard from her parents and grandparents. Later, she came to speak it far away.
A donde arrapan al huerco. México era para nosotros, en la carta, solo un país que de la banda izquierda le encolgaba una lengua larga con el nombre de la Baja California.
At the God-forsaken ends of the earth, Mexico? Mexico was for us on the map just a country with a long tongue hanging off its left side called Baja California. A short time after her arrival, Esther Benaroya, my paternal grandmother, decided to go to Sears Roebuck, the department store blossoming right there before her eyes, agitated by neon lights. She needed to buy her pins to placate her curls. She went up the escalator with a fear that no one seemed to notice. She headed toward the second floor, and very sure of what she was looking for, she approached a clerk.
Señorita, quiero mercar unas firquetas para los cabellos.
Señorita, I like to buy some firquetas for my hair.
Some what?
Trocas, firquetas. The employee isn't able to comprehend. Some weeks earlier, she had learned the word chingada, fucked up, and then chingadera, fucked up thing, worthless piece of crap, though she preferred the diminutive. Chingaderica, worthless little piece of crap. So then she corrected herself.
Quiero unas chingadericas, bre.
I'd like some worthless little pieces of crap, bre. The employee blushed and shot off to find the manager. Esther Benaroya left with a cardboard packed, filled with hairpins, with gum tips. It made her happy to infuriate people. She'd been told before that the word chingadera is impolite in this country, but she can't be bothered by that. It's her way of saying,
Agora hablo vuestro español como lo habláis vosotros en la España y en México.
No, I speak your Spanish like you speak it in Spain than in Mexico. Some people were scandalized, while others ignored her or chuckled at her wackiness. Before she arrived in Mexico, all she could say that it was a faraway country where people wore cowboys, chapeos hats, and ate excessively spicy foods.
Dice el marido mío que los mostachos le quedan quemando después de estas comidas de fuegos.
My husband says his mustache always burns after he eats these fiery foods. When she came ashore in these lands, she thought for a moment that all Mexicans had Jewish blood. They all spoke Spanish, that language of the Sephardim from Turkey and Bulgaria.
Ama, aquí lo hablan malo, malo, malo. No saben decir las cosas con su música de origen.
But here they speak poorly, poorly, poorly. They don't know how to say things with the music of their origins.
Since my childhood, but especially since I started writing poetry, Ladino resonates in me, a language that I heard through my childhood. I have enjoyed the charm of being lulled in that old and sweet Spanish that I always heard in my everyday life but never spoke. Ladino, also called Sephardic language, Judeo-Spanish, Judeo-Spaniolit, or Judesmo, is an archaic Castilian impregnated with words found in the new homelands where the expulsion from Spain at the end of 15th century took the Sephardic Jewish community. As a child, I got used to hearing the idioms in which my grandmothers expressed themselves. For years, I thought that what I heard was the language of the old, that all the grandparents of the earth spoke that strange Spanish, intertwined with words from other worlds. As part of a Sephardic Bulgarian family that took root in Mexico in the post-war period, I lived as represented by Chinese boxes or Russian dolls in a reality contained within others. At home, cooking was done with spices from different geographies, rice stews or grape leaves that appear in the Old Testament alternated with gyuvech, recipes from Bulgarian cuisine, with the mole poblano, this stew from Puebla typical of the Mexican gastronomy. Thus, in the fire of the burners, there was a mixture, as if our kitchen were the United Nations. I used to think that this fusion in which I lived was natural. Although knowledge during childhood touches our senses before our intellect, I learned to move amidst the customs of various cultures. I am grateful for that destiny that I somehow saw reflected in Story of a Life by Israeli writer Aaron Appelfeld. During his childhood, Appelfeld was surrounded by 4 languages: German, Yiddish, Romanian, and Ruthenian, a kind of an Ukrainian dialect. Appelfeld refers to how those languages live inside him in strange harmony, completing each other in such a way that they had formed a unique amalgam rich in nuances, contradictions, satire, and humor. In it, the writer found an irreplaceable space for sensations, for the subtlety of feelings. Those languages, he wrote, stopped living in me, but sometimes a word is enough to make complete sins resurface as if by a magic spell. The debt towards the Judeo-Spanish legacy inherit becomes a declaration of love for what I have lost, as if what I have in my hands were the possibility of reconstructing something that sleeps under oblivion, something whose awaking would be scary. It has taken me a while to stir what was in me, even before the words. The palabricas, little words, or dulces verbos, sweet words, in which I have found pleasure, shelter, and a form of drifting away, a sensation that I did not take into account during the years in which I only hovered above them, fearful, but also immensely yearning to touch the words from within. I claim that with a language rooted in the 16th century, monographs on contemporary science or experimental poetry can be written. A language is not sustained by a decree, but by its speakers and the literature that represent it. Ladino, a language that no children anywhere in the world speak, and I say this conscious that I may sound as a bird of ill omen, is in danger of extinction, just like a species. Caught against such a horizon, the exercise of literary expression will only preserve the memory of the language's wealth. And my own question arises. Can contemporary poetry be written in the archaic form of 500 years ago? Hopefully, the answers can be contained in the poems I have written so far in Judesmo and not only in theoretical commentaries. The truth is that as contemporary as a creative proposal may be in that language, it will always include phrases used in the poetry of the Golden Age, as well as old lost expressions of transformed into today's Spanish. All this is part of a kind of spell cast on me when I write in the language of my ancestors. I can't explain why, but for me, the word sequence in Ladino is a musical scale. Using oral expressions and idioms of Ladino makes me ponder on the veracity of a Chinese proverb, which is also the expression of a poetic truth. The bird does not sing because it has an answer. It sings because it has a song. Writing in Ladino is an explosion or outburst that need to be invented. How do you say cellular physiology? How do you designate cinema or virtual communication? Those who write in Judesmo have to deal with these questions, and to be sure, they face new questions coming from the answers. As a natural speaker of Spanish, my mother tongue, that however was not the first language of my parents, my daily life swings over the century that oscillate between Ladino and Spanish. I published Ansina with the absolute awareness that those who would read it would only be those who find pleasure in the light and shadow of Spanish. My ties with Ladino are more anchored to the love for the childhood of my language than to the love of the language of my childhood. Por mi boca, through my mouth. That is the title of one of the 3 books related to Judeo-Spanish that I have published. During my childhood, well, this book was published with Jacobo Sefami. We worked together during several months, and the book was like the present for special visitors in the International Book Fair in Guadalajara that was dedicated to Israel. During my childhood, Judaismo entered through my ear, but never came out through my boca. The book, as I said, in collaboration with Jacobo Sefami, proposes a brief anthology of 6 texts of the Sephardic diaspora, accompanied by our modern Spanish by our modern Spanish versions. The set opens up an extensive and capricious arc of time, from fragments of the Ferrara Bible from the mid-16th century, or from the Myriam Loes, whose writing began in the 18th century, until Denis Leon, a Tucuman poet, whose work was born in the 21st century. Tela de sevoya, onion cloth, the 3rd work of which I am going to say something today. It was the first book I wrote linked to the Judeo-Spanish, and so far my only creative narrative work. Tela de sevoya, onion cloth, represented, I know now, one of the greatest challenges in my already lengthy battles with literary creation. Why a challenge? Because I never suspected, not even when I started writing it, that I was on my way to a different form of expression. I had never faced a narrative work, and I always thought that I was not interested in trying. My ignorance was my best weapon and my greatest danger. Those were years of struggle. While trying to turn it toward a poetry project, my writing was moving to other genres. All of a sudden, one day, I gave in to what I had in my hands, and that demanded another rhythm. Tela de Cebolla is and is not a memoir, because what it tries to portray is not the history of a family, but the biography of a language. To speak from that place, I only had a primitive memory, and I accepted that. Today, I can see Tela de Cebolla as a liminal work situated between a contemporary language and an archaic language, wakefulness and sleep, life and death, in the place where poetry, information, theatrical dialogue, remembrance, travelogue meet between the intimate history and the historical event. The story of Tela de Cebolla is told in the voice of a girl. One of its main focuses looks closely at her relationship to a hatefully bossy, Victorian, grumpy grandmother who awakens in the girl a constant desire for rebellion. However, it is from her, more than anyone else, that this girl receives an invaluable inheritance, that of having heard in her childhood those archaic and enduring forms that exist almost secretly under the child's language. Jacobo.
It is to me she speaks the last words she will ever express in this world. Literally, on her deathbed, lying there with her body all purple. There is a nurse who cares for her day and night. Why is my abuela's body like that? I asked the señorita dressed in white.
You'll get like that too when you die.
Oh, yes, I tell her, thinking that her response is innocent. When I tell this to my mother, she opens her arms.
That's not true, hija. Don't believe everything people tell you.
What I don't tell her, because it makes me feel ashamed, is that Abuela Victoria had a moment of lucidity before she died. She sighs, pulling in the air as if she were going to start an engine. I take her hand and I say into her ear, Abuela, do you forgive me? She turns her face to me and says,
No. Para una preta criatura como sos, no hay pedrón.
no, for an evil little girl like you, there is no forgiveness. My abuela turns her head back until it makes a straight line with her body, sighs again, and dies. Her famous last words, there is no forgiveness. It's possible to relive this scene in various tones. An old woman lying in her bed turns her face to the left, lets out a sonorous bit of stomach gas, tells her granddaughter that she does not forgive her, and dies. From that moment, her words disperse like an echo. They shatter time, and popping up at the edge of the window pane for days, weeks, and months, she'd appear mischievous, vengeful, malignant to remind me, showing me her well-worn teeth. There is no forgiveness. We take her to the cemetery in a grayish coffin. When we get back, I notice my mother is white, extremely pale. Put on lipstick, I suggest. I kiss her, but remember that the dead woman advised her numerous times not to kiss her children because it would ruin them. My abuela died well into the 20th century without ever leaving the 19th, always rubbing our noses in the fact that she grew up without electric lights, telephones, or cars. Days before she died, almost as a farewell, she saw the broadcast announcing one small step for a man, a giant leap for mankind. Time continued to turn and strangle her entire body. She was left stranded in a before that for her would be last forever. Rest, abuela. There is the indigos of other worlds, and tell my clan you are forgiven. If it wasn't for you, where I would have gotten my viervos y las dichas, words and sayings. No one else injected them into my bloodstream like you did during that childhood. I can still hear.
It should be noted that Tela de sevoya took its title from a proverb in Judeo-Spanish. El meollo del hombre es tela de cebolla. The human mind is like onion cloth. The image of an onion also served for me in order to welcome all those layers of time that separate the two languages. Just a few days ago, though, I understood something else. Since the most recent earthquake in Mexico City on September 19, 2017, I had to abandon my home, an apartment in the beautiful neighborhood of Condesa in Mexico City. Since then, my life is a constant move. The building suffers structural damage. It was demolished, and as I am writing these words, it is likely that we can only talk about its debris. Blessed be the one who lost her home, because she can always be dreaming about it, wrote the Russian poet Anna Akhmatova. For almost 2 years after the earthquake, I had access to my place. There was my library, and if I needed a book or a document, I could go home and take it. That idyll was over a few months ago. For 40 days and their proverbial nights, I dedicate myself to packing, dismantling, putting together, throwing away papers, and purging that unmanageable library, returning to photographs, documents, contracts, many of them unusable. In that chaos, I opened a box full of letters. Without any order, they were in front of me, piled up, messages of old loves, of friends who no longer exist, official literary family letters. Suddenly, I found a letter from my brother, dated in March 1977, 3 months after my mother's death. I had fled to Israel, where a brother of hers still lived in Haifa. I wanted to get away from mourning, even if I took it with me. In that letter, my brother told me that our house in Mexico, remained the same, that he was almost never there, that he only used it for sleeping. I quote a passage from memory. Last night, I opened the kitchen drawer where potatoes, garlic, and onions were stored. You remember? Onions grew new roots and leaves. I was impressed, and I started thinking about everything you and I have to do now to overcome, to move forward. We were alone. I was then 20 years old. My father had died in our childhood. Reading that fragment shook me. The paragraph had remained in me, albeit not consciously. Those old onions growing anew that I didn't remember during the years I wrote my novel appeared a few weeks ago to reveal something about our nature that I did not know. Now I am convinced that the sevoya of my title exceeds the allusion to the proverb in Judaism. Bruno Bettelheim, in The Weight of a Life, explains why Freud was a collector of archaeological pieces and how he used to relate them in his research of the subconscious. For the psychoanalyst, beauty lies in the complete and undistorted recovery of that which has lasted for a long time, as if we were told that the longer an object has remained buried, the more revelations we will be obtained by removing it from darkness. For me, to write in Judeo-Spanish is a delight and it's a challenge. To date, there is no Ladino dictionary that has the last word. They undoubtedly creates a babel of signs and also a charm that Judeo-Spanish shares with few languages. It is logical that this condition represents a difficulty to contemporary writers who decide to write in Judeo-Spanish, but it also opens up a space for inventiveness. Ladino is a homeless language and until recently without an academy. Now the academy, all of them are fighting. What does a writer like me pursue when trying to conquer the language in the literary field? For what? For whom? For the millions of speakers of Spanish and even others Roman languages, Ladino is a treasure that, like the archaeological pieces that Freud collected, reveals an entire universe when it comes to light. One of these treasures exists for some internet users who communicate daily in their beloved language. It is still paradoxical that there is this forum called Ladino Comunidad that uses 21st century technology to put in communication about 1,400 members from different parts of the world in a 15th century language. From that group, I adapted this little story told by Mrs. Betty Shaul, a resident of Paris and born in Turkey. En inglés se dice, how are you? Aquí en Francia es comment ça va, o más en curto, ça va. Y el otro responde, mesmo si tiene un pie en la tumba, ça va.
In English, you say, how are you? Here in France is comment ça va? Or more briefly, ça va? And the other person always responds, even with one foot in the grave, ça va.
Teníamos un humorista que se murió hay poco tiempo. Se llamaba Raymond DeVos y tenía una maestría de la lengua francesa de un nivel muy, muy alto, como todos los que deben de hacer acrobacia con los verbos.
There was a comic who died a little while ago. His name was Raymond DeVos, and he possessed great mastery over the French language, as would anyone in any language who has to do acrobatics with words.
Contaba con muchas palabras y meneaba mucho los brazos y las manos y decía, cuando encontrás uno en la calle que vos demanda ¿cómo ça va? Debéis absolutamente responder ça va, porque si respondés no, ça ne va pas, es una vela muy grande, preta y muy negra.
He had many words at his disposal, and he gestured often with his arms and hands and said, when you meet someone in the street and they ask you, comment ça va? You absolutely have to answer ça va. Because if you answer no, ça ne va pas, it is a problem, a big one, terrible and very bad.
Voy a aclarar la situación por vosotros.
I'll make the situation clearer for you.
Alors, ça va?
So, ça va?
No, ça ne va pas.
No, ça ne va pas.
Ah, ¿y de qué no estás bueno?
Oh, you aren't well. What's wrong?
Me caí de las escaleras.
I fell down the stairs.
Ah, ¿y en cuál escalera te caíste?
And in which stairs did you fall down?
En la escalera de mi casa.
The stairs in my house.
Ah, ¿y en qué casa? ¿La de París o la de Nice?
Ah, and in which house? The one in Paris or in Nice?
La de París.
The one in Paris.
Ah, no estabas en Nice.
Oh, you weren't in Nice.
No, estaba en París.
No, I was in Paris.
¿Y de qué estabas en París?
And why were you in Paris?
No, tenía que escapar un hecho.
I had to finish some work.
¿Y qué hecho tenías de urgente en París?
And what urgent business did you have in Paris?
Debía de arreglar un problema.
I had to deal with a problem.
Ah, ¿y qué problema tenías?
And what the problem did you have? And Raymond DeVos would go around in circles like that for a whole hour. One person suffering with pain and the second not even listening to the responses. First, because all of this is not the least bit interesting to him.
Dunque, amigos, cuando encontrás uno en la calle, es mejor de decir que todo está bien, ça va. Si no, no es capaz por 2 horas y el otro ni siente lo que dijiste y se lo va a olvidar todo lo que contaste en 2 puntos y vuestras angustias vos quedarán en la tripa.
Therefore, friends, when you run into someone in the street, it's better to say that everything is fine, ça va, because if you don't, you won't get away for 2 hours and the other person won't listen to what you're saying, and in 2 minutes, they'll forget everything you told them, and you'll still carry your worries around in your gut.
I do not know if the small examples with which I have illustrated this talk expresses the reasons of my love for Ladino. And although I don't want to become the official writer of Judeo-Spanish, I know I will always have a foot in this world that is being lost and of which I am an involuntary and grateful heiress. When I want to explain the reasons for writing in this language, I think of the image of a torch lit for centuries that each generation is concerned with keeping burning, as in the Olympic Games. The sensations of having received from my elders that ancient fire that is going out in my hands fuels my need to do something, however modest, by writing in Judeo-Spanish now in the 21st century, when the tongue is struggling among us, as some of the native languages of Mexico, for the miracle of its light. Thank you.
Well, many thanks, Myriam. It's been a wonderful talk, and it really makes me wish that, let's hope that this pandemic may be over and we may re-invite you to Texas, como Dios quiere, and tour you around campus and show you the libraries and introduce you to my graduate students and my colleagues. May it happen soon.
I hope so.
Okay, questions and comments for Myriam? Tatiana.
Thank you very much, Myriam, for that talk. I have 2 questions that are, I think, related. I have not read the autobiographical book, Onion Cloth, but I do have a question about your journey to Bulgaria. What was when you immediately went, what was your destination? What were you, where were you going? What were you hoping to find when you went? And what was did you have a network? Did you know anybody there? How did you navigate that journey? And my second question is then how you went about sort of practically learning Ladino.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that journey to Bulgaria was the most emotional journey I've ever done in my life. And I'm sure it won't happen again, even though I was in Bulgaria now in December. But that first journey to Bulgaria was very, very moving. My parents came to Mexico and they never returned to Bulgaria again. I lost my father very young, and he was born in Plovdiv. And I have no information about his house, about his neighborhood, about nothing. I know he was going to the synagogue sometimes. The Bulgarians are never religious people. They keep some traditions, but they are not very religious people. So I knew that I was not going to find his house. But it was very important to be there, to breathe that air. It was not the same with the house of my mother's house in Sofia. In that time, the house, they lost their house with the Second War, even they didn't lose their lives. In Bulgaria, the history of the Jews were very, very different. It was converted to a kindergarten, and then it was a pizza restaurant. When I was there, it was a restaurant. And well, the trees were the same trees, and the plants, the high plants were the same plants. It was very moving for me. And I had in my head the idea of interviewing the oldest people in Bulgaria that still speak Ladino. They have a club that every Tuesday get together. Now they get older, and that club is only once a month. So I made those interviews to the Ladino speakers in Plovdiv, in Sofia, and well, I don't have even the words to say what it was for me. It was very moving. It was very happy and very sad at the same time. There is a history in the book that when I get to that pizza restaurant, I start, no. First, I had the address of the house. It was Iskra 33. And well, I was with a friend, with a Guggenheim. It was my privilege that I could invite a friend of mine. So we were together in Bulgaria, and I said, oh, wow, we are now in Iskra 36. Please take a photograph of me. I want to share it with my brother. And she took a photograph. I called my brother at night, and I said to him, well, it was so moving. I was in the house, the tree in Iskra 36. He said, what? It is not 36, it's 33. So I came the next day again, the photograph, I cried again with the camera. It was like, like you know, so paradoxical, everything. And I didn't know at that moment that I was going to write a novel, as Naomi told you. Well, now the other thing that was very moving for me, and not moving, interesting, it is that in my hearing in some place, I remembered more words in Bulgarian that I didn't know that I knew. So it was very interesting to say that is cold, that is hot, I don't want, that I want, or to say the taxi driver something I could speak like a 3 years old child, no? What was the second question, Tatiana? Excuse me.
How you went about learning Ladino?
Yeah. Well, Ladino, it is a language of my house because my grandparents came to Mexico quite old. Now I feel such an emotional feeling, because I always thought of my parents. My parents, they came to Mexico in their 30s. It was very different to make a migration in that age, that to make a migration so close to their deaths. So they didn't move to contemporary Spanish as my parents did. So that was the language that they talk to me, just that I am born in Mexico. I am the first one that born in Mexico. And I also always answer to them in Spanish. Never said a word in Ladino, never. It was not natural, but it was natural to hear that. A lot of years I forgot about Ladino. It was not present, not in my writing, not in my life, only with my brother, that sometimes we were laughing a lot, remembering those proverbs and dichas in Ladino. But I don't know, I think I started understanding that I couldn't touch the Ladino because it was like touching my most beloved people that they are not in this, they were not in this world. And I think I had an influence, a strong influence about the Juan Gelman poet, that he published a book called Tibaju. Tibaju is, how do you say, Jacobo?
Beneath.
Underneath or below.
And it's a very intelligent title because it's true. It's underneath the Spanish. There is another Spanish, a secret language. And afterwards, I learned that Juan Gelman didn't belong to a Sephardic family at all. The language he heard when he was a child was the Yiddish. So I admire that. And I said, well, I have to touch. I also want to touch that. And as you know, well, I'm a writer, and the most beloved thing for a writer is the language. So imagine what the Ladino means to a person that loves the Spanish. This is the childhood of the Spanish. That's why I think the Ladino is interesting not only for Sephardic people, for Jewish people, not at all. Because when I give a talk to Mexicans that have no relation to Ladino, they open their mouths like this because they use a lot of words. They don't have an idea that those words are part of the old Spanish. And it still happens. It's not that it happened before. It still happened. The people say Ansina, they can say huerco, they can say nadien, they can say andehuites. And the people that talks like that, they are most of the times are like poor. So they are seen like, oh, poor people, they don't know how to speak Spanish. And it's not true. They speak the Spanish like it was frozen in time. It's very interesting to be a Spanish speaker and to be related to Ladino, because you understand a lot of things.
Okay, here in chat, we have a question from Ricardo Villarreal.
Yes. Is there variation in Judeo-Spanish between the regions of settlements? For example, what is Judeo-Spanish in Turkey different from that was spoken in Salonika? There are a lot of variants. Oh, yes, a lot of variations, but the language is the same. I think the variation that is really a very strong variation is the variation. It is spoken in the north in the north of Africa, in Morocco. That they speak a variation that has another even word, that it is Haketia. The variations are absolutely in Europe. I mean, there is a poet, a very well-known and wonderful poet called Clarice Lispector. For instance, how she uses the vowels, it's very strange to me because I am not used to that.
Myriam,
Todo es así, todo con las vowels that are the devil, deviles, how you say that?
Weak.
Weak, and I am not used to that use. And they called something in Ladino Comunidad, Brian Kitchen, maybe you can, maybe if you are sometimes in Ladino Comunidad, you can, ¿cómo se dice? Dar el testimonio, o sea,
Give
to see
witness.
that
Bear witness.
they discuss about how you say that some platillo, ¿cómo se dice platillo para comer?
dish.
A dish.
Dish. No, in Turkey you say that. No, in Bulgaria you say, no, in France is different. So they discuss about this, but the language is the same.
Okay, here we have a question. What is something you wish everyone knew about Ladino?
Oh my God. I would love to answer in Spanish. Ladino, first of all, most of the people think that Ladino is a language that the Jews spoke in Spain before they were expelled, and it's not like that. The thing that I would love that people would know about Ladino is that Ladino has a memoir of sounds that Spanish have lost, like the sound j, mujer, like casa, that now is casa, that the Ladino has a conception of the world so entrañable, how you say that?
Hearing.
Full of diminutivos. That well, that as all languages that are with such a minority speakers, it has the right to live, and I admire all the efforts, institutional and academical efforts, but unfortunately it's too late for me. It's what I think, because now there are no children that it's not a language to communicate to people in the natural day-by-day life. But I would like to say also that it's my responsibility to say that there are a lot of people, absolutely Ladino speakers, that not agree with me, that they think different. They think that the Ladino will survive, and I think it will survive as a memory, yes, and I wish with all my heart that will survive, but it will survive not as it was spoken some years ago, before all those old people still used it to communicate. As well, for instance, my grandparents, between them, they mixed the Bulgarian with the Judeo-Spanish all the time, and sometimes they could speak and speak and speak in Judeo-Spanish between them. That is not happening now anymore.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Chini plato, says Brian. Yes. Brian, do you know from where comes the word chini? No. Your micro is closed.
You're muted, Brian.
Okay. I know that they use Chinese, and by the way, this was such a wonderful talk. All your works are amazing, and I love how you also translated with Jacobo into Spanish as well in the segments you included in Por Mi Boca. It's really important work. But I'd have to look into the origin for Chini.
I think it's in the Turkish word, because I think most of the words that don't sound like Old Spanish are words from Turkey, from the Turkish. They come from the Turkish. For instance, how you say oficios? Los oficios.
El buró.
Excuse me?
El buró.
No, oficios. No.
El hecho.
Los diferentes oficios, carpintero,
El hecho, o G. Sí.
How you say it in English?
Trades.
Jobs.
Trades.
Jobs. All that jobs, I don't know why they are in those words are in Turkish. For instance, that one who makes shining to the shoes is the boyagi. If you say to someone that doesn't have any understanding with the Ladino, never will understand boyagi. And when I read for Mexican people, not related to Ladino, well, I have to explain some words, but most of them, there is an open bridge between the Spanish and the Ladino. But when I start saying paras or boyagi, they won't understand. I have to explain those words, or in Hebrew, no? I yesterday I was in the talk yesterday in Spanish. I was saying that in this pandemic time, I read and studied Del Quijote, and I was so impressed that El Quijote says suddenly the word desmazalado. That is not Old Spanish, because mazal is a Hebrew word, and desmazal is like making Spanish of a Hebrew word. And how Cervantes knew that word. Wow, I was so impressed. And I don't have the answer.
Okay, further thoughts, further considerations? So I would like to offer the thought that if you're worried about Ladino not having a future or living, it will certainly live in your works, which I hope people will continue to read. So there's some hope there. So if you're interested in looking at Myriam's work, I'd recommend starting with Onion Cloth, the English translation. And for people who are feeling enthusiastic about learning some Ladino, the website Ladino Comunita with a K. It's a place you can just sort of jump in and start trying to express yourself online in Ladino. They're not very judgmental. And I understand that you relied on it a lot while you were writing Onion Cloth.
Again?
That you went to Ladino Comunita a lot.
Yes, I was a lot in Ladino Comunita. That helped me a lot also to ¿cómo se dice recuperar?
Recover.
Yes, some words. Yes, absolutely. But you can be in Ladino community and be silent also. You can just read what others they speak. It's incredible. It's an incredible site. I don't know if Rachel Amado Bortnik, that created that wonderful space, is still in charge of Ladino Comunidad, but there is a Ladino Day that is very close to this date, and I know she will be speaking. She is a wonderful woman, and her Ladino is a natural and wonderful Ladino, not like mine that is an imitation.
Okay, we do have one more question from Uri Kolodny. Is it taught in academic institutions in the US or in Israel?
Ask Brian.
¿Qué? What was the question?
Is
Me lo traduces, ya me empiezo a saturar y ya no entiendo nada.
Si el ladino se enseña en instituciones académicas en Estados Unidos o en Israel.
Brian, you have the answer. Please.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's been some efforts in recent years to offer classes or workshops. UCLA has had workshops for a number of years. I am a professor at Binghamton University in New York, and I offer different courses. Sometimes we have a Ladino lab that we started this year. The University of Washington has brought in scholars to their Sephardic Studies program as well. Tufts University and UPenn have offered Ladino as well. So yeah, there are some in the United States, certainly, whether they're for academic credit or more workshops. And then in Israel, most major universities in Israel offer Ladino and have full programs in the language.
I feel so sad that in Mexico we don't have nothing about learning Ladino. Even there is a school, a Sephardic school, and well, for me it's very sad that they don't feel any interest in learning Ladino. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Myriam, for visiting us online. Hope that in the future we will be able to bring you here in person and properly host you. But in the meantime, you've done a lot to keep our intellectual life going in times of the pandemic. So many thanks. And thanks also to all our audience members and their great questions.
Thank you to all of you. And I hope that when I'll be in Austin, I will improve my English.
Okay. Bye-bye then.
Thank you. Bye.